My name is Tim Medin. I have my own security consulting company. I'm an instructor with SANS. I'm the program director for the SANS master's program, IANS faculty. Probably if you use some of the tools, you probably know best for Kerber roasting, but that's the short summary on me. Let's jump now. Let's talk a little bit about some of the sort of dumb things I've seen over the years. Now, we go to these conferences and people break out these like really cool cutting edge types of attacks, but so often that is not what we need. How many of you are a red teamer? Offensive? Outside of work? No one raises their hand. Look, I grew up in Wisconsin. I know some of you are lying. Okay, whatever. So many of these attacks, we just simply need super lazy. And in fact, so many of these issues that we see, so many of the breaches that we see. Now, who hacks, like when all the big breaches happen, what is the three-letter group that hacks everybody? NSA, well done, yeah, but... What? 3 letters, man. APT, right? APT is the one that hacks everybody. Because no one wants to truly admit they were hacked by Steve, who is 13, living in his mom's basement. Right? It doesn't go well in the press when you say, oh yeah, we were hacked by, Steve when he was bored after he finished his algebra. Right? On a Thursday. But so often this APT that's attacking you isn't very A. A stands for advanced, right? Most notably, we've got Equifax. How long between when the well, first off, what was the vulnerability that got Equifax? Apache, right? There was known code that they were compromised with. How long between when the patch was released and when they found out about the breach? When the breach actually happened even? 3 months? Now, APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. This is known clicky code to get ownage. They did the clicky code straight off the internet 3 months after the vulnerability was publicly announced. Is that terribly advanced necessarily? Is that even persistent? Right? Like, even if, Steve in his mom's basement, right, took off for summer vacation, that doesn't even last 3 months. So many times, these attacks, we're not going to get that high-tech, cutting-edge type thing. It's always these known vulnerabilities, these low-level, very, very simple type scenarios. So how many of you offensively do some phishing? Nobody? How many of you defenders do some phishing or receive some phishing? That's it? Only this side of the room. The rest of you guys? You guys not have email? I mean, I'm envious because I freaking hate email, but that's a whole separate discussion. Now, I do a lot of phishing as part of my work, and there's some very simple things that are just extremely effective. It used to be super effective, simply getting a company name, like, let's say we'll have like Target.com, or what's a big one here in town? Miller, all right? So I'd say like, MillerDeals.com. I'd start buying some of my own domains. And I've seen some organizations, they'll say, you know what, that domain was registered yesterday. It has not been categorized by WebSense or any of the other tools. We're just going to say, that's a no-go. That's not going to work for us. So we end up getting blocked on the way in. Or they click on our link and that's not going to work. So instead, I just use somebody else's reputation. So we can simply look for one, go to like expired domains. Somebody else has a business, they put their hopes and dreams in it, and then it failed miserably, right? It's not funny, yeah. Right, it failed. So this domain is still out there, and someone has built up that reputation surrounding it. So if you look back in WebSense or any of the other tools, we can see, okay, this has been around for a decade, it's in a known good category. Now we've taken advantage of that and we're abusing that trust relationship. Now, when you receive, what do we tell our end users? We tell them never click on blank in email. Nope, links. One guy? Never click on links in email, right? Except How many of you have secure email in your organization? What is inside 100% of secure mails? Links, right? So then we tell our end users, don't click on links unless it looks super important. Right? It's like, don't click on links, but if it kind of looks like it's important, you should totally click on that link because it's important. And end users are like, what the hell are you talking about? And they end up clicking away, right? So one of my favorite things to do is go to the expired domains. Let's do a simple search for any sort of .com with the word message in it. Pick that sucker up. So we've got some really easy ones. There was like, I did this yesterday. There was gosilentmessage.com. Private message link. Get that message. Private message now. There's another one that's called message in a condom. I'm like, is it a long message? Anyway. Great joke, right? So what we can do is we can steal these, set up a domain, pretend that we're, Joe from IT, send the message in, hey, we're testing in our new system. And of course, with a secure email, you need to log in. So we can have maybe a payload as well as some credential theft. This was another really fun, super stupid, very dumb sort of a situation. So we had a Windows Defender. This was when, you guys remember the Microsoft DDE stuff that came out kind of late last year and everyone kind of freaked out about, but we knew about it for 10 years, but sort of re-freaked out last year because everyone started using it for phishing. So Defender was actually sort of on the leading edge of shutting some of that down. If we put a malicious payload in, this is a malicious payload from Cobalt Strike. So from Cobalt Strike, generate a payload, literally copy and paste, and put it inside the macros. Now, when I tried to save it to disk, after one of the updates in December, November-ish, like, sorry, this is no good. It detected this malicious payload. So my colleague of mine, Derek, he was working his butt off, like trying to figure out like what exact line of code was causing the problem. Can we change case on something? What does it actually do? He was like opening up the Defender DLLs and executable, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm kind of lazy. So I copied the entire thing. I copied the script and I put it in A12. I turned the script right, turned the text color white, and then when the thing would open, it says execute whichever in A12. And Windows Defender's like, oh, fair enough. Okay. I was like, really? That worked? And I'm talking to Derek. I'm like, Derek, I got this really high-tech way around it. He's like, what'd you do? It's like, copy and paste it. Into what? The cell that was closest to my mouse. Right? Anyways, we just put in nothing special about A12. It's just, that's where my mouse was, and I was feeling kind of lazy. Paste it in there. Open the spreadsheet. It runs the macro, and then we get our execution. Now, they have since locked that down, but I thought it was a very sort of lazy, very simple way around this defense. Another situation. This was a scenario where we were trying, it was an endpoint, had Cylance on it. We were trying to do a sort of trusted insider, a insider who has gone rogue. We tried to recreate that. So we were trying to download something to allow us to exfil data and get remote shell. So what's a very simple tool we could use for that? What's the Swiss Army knife of networking? Netcat, right? Pull down Netcat. Tools are like, nope, not going to work for you. So we went to Nmap. Went to nmap.org, grabbed ncat.exe, downloaded that. Tools are like, oh, fair enough. You're cool. You're part of Nmap. We trust you. And, off to the races. Again, these sort of simple things. No recompiling, because I suck at C and coding and such. And I don't have to open up the IDE. Very, very simple sort of a technique. All right. Again, going back to some of those simple things. I had some clients call me up right after Spectre meltdown. Right? Spectre meltdown, the processor abuse, where we could read some kernel memory, and they're absolutely freaking out about Spectre meltdown. They're like, hey, Tim, how should we fix this? I'm like, very simply, you should change your passwords, change your password policy. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm like, no. You need to fix this. Like, but they're like, Tim, do you understand Spectre and Meltdown? I'm like, yeah, I absolutely do. But I got in the front door of your organization with a single factor of fall 2017. Okay? Like, Spectre and Meltdown is up here. You guys are way the hell down here. Right? Now, you guys have heard why this is a really good use case? No? Yes? No? All right, we'll tell the story. How many of you have ever worked the help desk after Christmas or a holiday? Some of you look like you have shame on your face. It's okay. So what is the number one question that you get after Christmas? Forgot my password, right? What is my password? So end users sitting at their desk, and they're like, oh man, I have to change my password. And by the way, how often traditionally have we had to change our password? Every 90 days. Why? Because when Moses came down from the mountain, he had a third tablet. And on that tablet, it said, thou shalt... No, that wasn't there, right? It's because in the 70s, yes, I said 70s, it took us 90 days to crack a password. Now these days, we've got GPUs where we can crack billions per second. We've got techniques with pass the hash where we don't even have to crack it. And of course, we've got Mimikatz where I can just extract it straight from memory. So we've got this sort of old school scenario where we have to change our password every 90 days, and the auditors are like, thou shalt change your password every 90 days. So end user comes back from Christmas, just changes their password. So they want to come up with a way to remember their password, right? So they look outside and it's snowing. And they're swearing at IT because they have to come up with a new password, and they can't use the last 874 passwords that they've used before. And then 90 days later, they look out and it's, the flowers are coming up and they're swearing at IT again. And then 90 days later, it's Wisconsin, so it's snowing. Right? So they look out and they come up with this brilliant idea like, what should I use as my password? Right now, spring. Right? But the problem is, capital S, lowercase pring, well, it's not long enough. And I need a number. And there's a spring next year. If only there was a number that would differentiate this spring from next spring. And they sit for probably 45 minutes to an hour to come up with their genius solution. Which is, of course, 2018, all right? Spring 2018. And then in 90 days, you guys look like confused, like, I don't know. It's Wisconsin, we don't have that next one. Yeah, summer 2018, and it rolls and rolls and rolls. And this works way more often than it should. And there are some very simple ways where we can stop this kind of crap and shut down a lot of the very just absolutely dead simple intrusions. Okay? Yeah, so I was working with Derek on an engagement. We kind of tightly scoped. We had very limited, a red team. And then the next week, we had this 2017 thing with a single factor VPN in right from the very beginning, did some Kerber roasting, and absolutely did all sorts of kind of fun things. All right? So going back to our Equifax scenario. If you're just starting out, you don't have to necessarily go with the latest and greatest, most high-tech type attacks, because oftentimes the simple stuff works. And to be honest, the real APT, they're not going to pull out their ace in the hole until they absolutely need it. NSA is not going to show up at your front door with their, Stuxnet scenario to break in when they can log in with Spring 2018 or some other crap. There is no APT that's absolutely dead stupid. And we, as defenders, people defending a network, we should be using these very simple type scenarios as well. Another scenario, we had there was an online, I forget the exact scenario, this was Derek's online OWA. We're like, wouldn't this be cool if we could extract some of the information from it? And we're like, we can work on a tool, and quickly Googled, and we're like, sweet, there's tools that already do that. There's a friend of mine has a sort of a thought. If you can think of a tool that you need in security, by the time you Google for it, somebody has already written it. Like so many times, you're like, I wish I could do this. Or you're talking to a colleague, I wrote this tool to do this, and somebody else has already done it. So spend your time quickly looking around. Other really sort of dumb type, dead, simple type attacks. So we had a webcam, a friend of mine had a blog post in 2012 Took a webcam. Now, how many of you have been to the IoT village or played with IoT, any of that stuff? How many of you are part of the Mirai botnet? A couple, no hands, but a couple, all right. Yeah, my fridge is, but, no, just kidding. So, very simple scenarios. If you're trying to get into this field, the very simple stuff oftentimes works. So what he did is he took this camera back in 2012, simply used binwalk to extract it. Now, back in 2012, it didn't have all of the nice features that it has these days. But what he did is he used binwalk to find the file system and then extracted the file system. And he looked around in the web root and he found a directory called Anani. What do you think Anani stands for? Anonymous. So he fires up the camera, browses to the /Anani directory, and now gets video feeds. And hypothetically, may or may not have checked all over the place and had access to those video feeds all over the world. Now, is this technique necessarily that difficult? No, right? In fact, he had a blog post on it, and I hadn't done much IoT at the time, because there frankly wasn't a ton. So I'm like, all right, cool. If he can do it, I can do it too. So I bought another camera from another vendor. I ran through with binwalk and extracted the file system. Now, it's a Linuxy type file system. On a Linuxy type file system, which one of the very first files you're going to look at? Etsy password, right? So take a look, Etsy password, user root, user 1, user factory test. See where this is going, don't you? Go to the user interface. Root, user 1. There is no factory test. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I log out, log back in as factory test, and now I've got access to the camera. And all of the cameras in non-extradition countries also log in. See how I played that game? No, but seriously though, but this was all over the place. And it took me, no joke, because I followed somebody else's tutorial, it took me about 3 minutes. All right, mostly because I wanted to get a Coke real quick or a beer or something right in the middle of it, but it was literally extract the file system and then look inside it. And I ended up contacting the company. Now this was before the bug bounties were necessarily very big. So you can't go up to the bug bounty, like someone who has, say, a product and be like, look, you pay me or I release this to the world. There's a technical term for that. It's called extortion. So you talk to them, it's more so those days, and these days are people a bit nicer, but you're like, hey, would you compensate for exclusive disclosure and a security vulnerability in one of your products? That apparently the lawyers like much better. But this is very simple type things. And because people ask me all the time, like, hey, Tim, where do I start? And they're like, hey, should I try to like reverse engineer Inspector Meltdown? Oh, hell no. Follow through some of these simple tutorials. Buy some other piece of whatever and work your way through it. Is it always going to work? No, not by a stretch. Another question I commonly get is like, well, how did you know that was going to work? Not a damn clue. None whatsoever. Well, what I am good at is I'm good at failing fast. You try a whole bunch of stuff, and eventually one of those pieces of spaghetti sticks on the wall. Okay? One of my favorite bugs. This is actually my favorite bug of all time. This was, how many of you have children? Kids ever ask you for ice cream? Yeah, they ever bug you till you kind of give in? You guys are like, no. Yeah, you have. You have, right? It's like, Dad, can I have some ice cream? No. 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 Dear God, you can have whatever you want. Right? This is that bug. You authenticate to MySQL. It's like, hey, can I authenticate? No. Can I authenticate? No. Can I authenticate? No. Your credentials are bad. No. 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 Fine, carry on. True story. 1 out of 256 times, this thing's like, yeah, fair enough. You tried. It's the soccer trophy bug. Like, you tried hard enough. Here you go. Why don't you get access? And I chatted with the guy, and I'm like, how did you find this out? He's like, oh, it's kind of embarrassing. We ran a Nessus scan internally, and it came up with the password, and I tried that password, and it didn't work. So I tried it again, and it didn't work. So I got mad, so I rage scripted it to like try it 1,000 times, and it's like, there you go, fair enough, you're in. I was like, huh, well that's an awesome bug. Like, cool way to find it, right? Just a little bit of rage salted into a work here. Another very sort of similar bug. We had a Cisco SSH auth bypass. Now, I ended up contacting this guy because I'm like, wow, how did you find this? I'm like, did you like virtualize a Cisco device? And how did you set this up? And what were your debugging tools? And he's like, don't tell anybody. But what he did is he accidentally overwrote his private key, and he was able to authenticate. But nobody else was able to authenticate. He's like, what the heck is going on? What the system was doing, it would say, like, all right, you need to authenticate. Cool. We got private keys? You got a private key? That's good enough. Your key, anything in the shape of a key is good enough. He literally overwrote his private key with his public key. And it let him in. It's like, oh, you have one? Yeah, we're cool. Right? And it let him in. So these sort of, again, these simple, dumb types of attacks oftentimes work. These very, very simple type stuff. What I'm sort of trying to come back to is try the dumb stuff first. Right? We see in all of these scenarios, was any of these terribly complicated? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. And it's sort of what I want to encourage you to do is try those dumb things. Also, when you get the new person in your company, listen to them. They're going to come up with some cockamamie, stupid ideas, let's be honest. But sometimes you'll be like, oh my God, that absolutely works. Right? And you don't want to smash those people down. We've all worked with those people. In fact, my first job was the most miserable years of my entire life. We would work 100 hours a week. Every time I came up with something that I thought was ingenious, my boss would tell me he had a better way to do it. And he would do absolutely nothing and just sort of beat me down over and over again. I'm like, man, is this how like adult life is? Because this sucks. Like, I don't know it was awful. So if you get some of those people in your organization, encourage them. Like, hey, you know what? Why don't we try and see if that works? Let's take a whack at it. Or help them steer them in the right direction. It's really easy to crush a new guy. And it's really easy to show how smart you are. But it's kind of difficult to lend that ear and actually encourage somebody to grow. And I've had a number of people after I've given this talk before, that was me before. And now I'm in that situation and I'm trying to help some of these new guys. And they come up with some really ingenious stuff that we hadn't thought of before. So learn from those noobs. This is a sort of a favorite scenario of mine. So there's a CTF we do. I teach at SANS. One of the SANS class has a very, very simple CTF question. It's a level 1 question. It's like the second question. It's designed to be quite simple. So you have this mobile device. You need to sniff the traffic, capture the traffic between it and a server, and you end up with this string. Okay? So very simply here, again, start with the baby steps. What types of characters do we see in this guy? Oh, no. I didn't ask you for the encoding. I asked you for what types of characters. Numbers, letters, uppercase, lowercase. We got do we have a plus or we don't? We get equal at the end. And the reason why I say take those baby steps, has anybody in this room ever dealt with base 32 before? Nobody? One hand. It looks very, very, very similar to base 64. And if you jump right past that first step, you're going to be like, why doesn't this ever decode? Why doesn't this decode? And it's because it's a different character set. So now we've decided uppercase, lowercase numbers, equal signs at the end. It's indicative of base 64, right? So what we see is some of the students take this. Now we use my favorite decoder, burp. Grab my string. Well, I got 8% of the battery life. Fantastic. It's a race. All right, so we take this into BERT, my favorite decoder. Again, very simple, very quick ways to click through this. So I can simply now what types of characters do we see? We got, it looks like numbers and letters. It's kind of in the hex range, right? So again, handy dandy tool like burp. And then we end up with this. Now the funny part here is watching the thought process of some of the important students in my class versus some of the newer people. The new people see this and be like, oh, shellcode. It's totally shellcode. And they're opening up IDA, and they're like, okay, maybe it's XOR shellcode. So they try XORing it, and they're like, whoa, maybe it's ARM, maybe it's x86, maybe it's MIPS, maybe it's like 8081 back from, the 70s. And they're doing all sorts of weird, crazy stuff because they sort of jump a little bit too far. Meanwhile, right next to them is the person who is, fresh out of college, just switched careers. They're like, you know what? Let's take a look real quick. Let's just continue on with that very simple process. And they click through a couple more of these. And they end up clicking on gzip. And it's so funny when you watch this, because you see, this guy's really smart. And he's getting all advanced. He's got, IDA open and Hopper and Radera at the same time, trying to reverse engineer this. And the dude next to him is like, hey, I got it. He's like, oh, how'd you do it? He's like, I just clicked a couple times. And they're like, right? So you try that little simple thing. We see this. Again, more ASCII hex. And we get to, this is a nice rickroll that we add to it. Okay. Now I saw this in a pen test, where they were doing this same sort of thing. They were taking some data, they were doing this sort of encoding over and over and over again inside of the APK file. They were taking a piece of it, and they were sending it to the server as a checksum of sorts. And just simply by taking it, throw it into burp, and be like, hey, wait, these 5 characters are always the same as the other ones. This was their sort of magic generation, their checksum generation. So we were able to bypass some of their checksums and send some arbitrary stuff to servers. So as part of that, too, I would encourage you, get out and teach some other people. None of this stuff was high tech, was it? Pretty much all of you in this room could have done this. And I can guarantee that some of you in this room are like, you know what, I would like to teach, but I don't necessarily have stuff that people would find interesting. Oh, I completely think you're wrong. There is some sort of knowledge that you have that other people in this room do not have. A good friend of mine did a talk at, I believe it was Wild West Hacking Fest. It was Exploitation 101. Just basic Stack Overflows. The room was absolutely packed. There were just a bunch of people in there, and he had a number of people come up to him afterwards. He goes, thank you, and they kind of whispered, like, thank you for giving that presentation. Like, I wanted to know how to do this, but I didn't want to ask anybody. Which is sort of a problem on multiple accounts, right? That means that the people, he works, or he's around people that he's not comfortable asking these types of questions. But it also means that, he didn't know this and didn't know where to go. So this room was packed with these people, like, thank you for teaching me this basic thing that I don't feel like I could have asked other people. Related to that, his talk, not very high tech. Come up, present some of that stuff. And I'll be honest with you, your first talk's gonna suck. Everybody's talk the first time sucks. The first time you learn how to walk, were you good at it? No. My kid's 5, right? And he still trips. It takes years to get good at it. Now, if you walk into it and you realize, you know what? I'm going to develop some of my presentation skills. I'm going to work through this. And maybe the first time it's not going to be as good. You're going to have some solid content that you worked hard on. But maybe your presentation, you work on that and do it over and over again. And I encourage you, get up and volunteer for this, because you will have an opportunity. You will have information that people in this room will not have. And I would kind of implore you to do that at some point, whether at this con or at some other one. All right? So with that, my time is up. I want to thank you guys for swinging by here for our light and engaging talk prior to the keynote. I guess I'm like fluffer talk or something. I don't know. I don't know what that means. Somebody told it to me. Cool. All right, if you guys don't have any questions, feel free to hang out. We'll grab a beer here in a little bit. I have some I Am Offensive stickers if anybody likes stickers. I like stickers. All right, well, thank you guys for coming.